So from there, Doreen came along, we got more and more friendly, she became a regular visitor to the house, close family friend of Julie and myself, and she started to teach me magic. Then we started to work rituals together. Then, very sadly, she suddenly announced in sort of spring of 1999 that she wasn't very well. We suddenly discovered that this was cancer, a very progressive cancer, and that she had but a few, she thought months, but it actually turned out to be a few weeks to live. And during that particular period of her life, she suddenly decided that she was going to leave me all of her magical possessions, manuscripts and all the rest of it, which I didn't expect, and I questioned her because I didn't want her to think that I'd asked for anything, because I hadn't. And when I said to her, Doreen, did you think that I'd actually asked you for any of this stuff? And she says, no, and you're probably the only bugger that never did. So she asked me if I would, she knew she was dying, and she asked me if I would conduct her funeral, which sadly I did, but with a great deal of pride. And so there I am now, left with a whole pile of wonderful witchcraft things, which is the most famous collection in the world.
Obviously, I've known Ashley for around 5 years, probably longer actually. A wonderful friend of mine, I really respect him greatly. And he's taught me a lot, and the way he comes off is very humble. And he talks very proudly about the collection that there is. I mean, could you give a description of some of the items that there is? You said about poetry and artifacts.
Okay. Well, first of all, maybe better if I described it the way that Doreen described it.
Okay, that'd be great.
She'd left me all these belongings, and she even did that in a roundabout way. She actually sent her stepson, for want of a better term, or the son of her partner, to come and see, to give me a copy of the will. And I didn't know anything about wills. The only time I'd ever seen anything to do with a will, my family certainly never left a will. The only experience I'd ever had about wills was in sort of a Dickens film, where he'd sit there with a high collar and everybody would sit around very well dressed, and he'd unscroll this thing and read out that the servants got all the goodies and his wife had been left nothing. So I didn't know much about wills, but the reason that she sent it up is that she wanted me to read it before I went to see her, and she was in hospital at this stage, to make sure that it was okay. And when I read that I bequeathed John Belham-Payne all my magical possessions, shocked was the first thing, and very unworthy. So when I went to see her the next day, she said, "Is that all right?" And I said, "No, it's not. Did you think that I'd asked you for things?" Which is when she said, "No, and you're the only bugger that didn't." She said that she'd come to that conclusion because and I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, I know you'll do the right thing." So we left it. She was dying, and I wanted to be with my friend and not bring too many things up about what I was going to. But I couldn't help but sit in her flat and look around at all these 2,000 quite rare books, all these figures that I'd seen in magazines, books, and other people's books, and wonder where they'd all come from. So the one night I sat there with her in bed and me sitting by her side and said, "Well, Doreen, if you have left me all this stuff, I guess you'd better tell me what it is and where it comes from." So the first thing that she did was say, "Well, under my bed, if you'll pull out that suitcase," I'll pull out the suitcase. And she said, "And in there you'll find Joe Gardner's original Book of Shadows, and then you'll find..." And the list just went on. And there were things. This was what they call them, a student flat or a
one bedroom.
one bedroom.
Okay.
A bedroom. That's all it was a bedroom. and a tiny little kitchen, but with 2,000 books in it, and we filled the barn when we got back with artifacts. But I mean, there's so much of, you know, there's Gerald Gardner's Athame, there's Gerald Gardner's sword, there is all of the stuff that Gerald Gardner made for Doreen, there is a sword which came from Alistair Crowley, there is all of Doreen's poetry, there is Bob Booker figures, there is the Belham-Payne jars. It's just an incredible collection of the whole thing. So she'd given it to me, and unfortunately she died, and I took possession of it and took it home, and then I started to get phone calls from people wanting to buy it, and Doreen didn't give me any restrictions on it. All that she said was, I know that you'll do the right thing. And I had no idea what doing the right thing was. Not at all. But the more that people tried to buy it from me, or part of it from me, the more that I knew that
it had to stay together.
It had to stay together. So eventually I came up with the idea of it had to be a museum. She'd made restrictions upon where it wasn't to go, so I couldn't put it into another museum. So I knew that what I had to do was put a museum around it. Now, the problem is that if I made it into a private museum, I'm 62 now, and if I'd have made it into a private museum, I would have had to run it, and eventually would have had to have either given it away or sold it. And I didn't want it to become a business. I wanted it to become a museum in the same way as any national museum is. So what I then decided to do was to put together, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, a museum and a trust that owned all of the artifacts, so that they couldn't be sold, and that it was owned by all of us. And that sounds very grand and very straightforward, but it's the most complicated thing that I've ever known. And I've had lots of people come along and try to help, and they have not had the same mindset as I had as to how it would work until I met your friend Ashley Mortimer. And Ashley, like myself, comes from the music business. We understand about publishing, we understand about copyrights, and we understand about lots of things. So with the help of Ashley, my wife, and two others, we put together a foundation. So now the Doreen Valiente collection, or the Doreen Valiente Foundation, which is what we've called it, owns all of the artifacts from the Doreen Valiente collection, and they can never be sold, they can never be given away, and they can never be used to raise money or anything. So the exciting news is that after 14 years, we've finally got a museum together. It's
brilliant.
So,
great news, it really is.
yeah.
So the idea about that is, you say it wants to be on the line of the national museums. Why? So that they will be available for the people to come, see, view, learn, understand, and to be informed of what those artifacts are. And I'm assuming by the collection size, by the way you put it, I guess you guys have even managed to scratch 10% of what is actually in there yet.
Well, we have. I mean, it sounds like it's massive. It's not. It's several hundred pieces, but it's not huge. But what it is it's important. You know, again, just going back to the Gerald Gardner thing. Gerald Gardner brought back from the Far East when he lived out there as in his official capacity. Lots of ivory things. So we've got ivory wands and just the most beautifully carved stuff. I mean, of course, these days, ivory is not a politically acceptable thing, and should never have been. But it's there, it exists, and we can't just throw it away. It would be insulting to the memory of Gerald Gardner and also the animal that it came from. So we've got lots and lots of very important pieces. Now, what is going to be exciting is the way that we're going to exhibit it, make people feel involved. And we not only now have Doreen's collection, but at least 2 other major collections as well. So the museum, when it opens, it should be open by the end of this year.
But could you tell us the location? 'Cause I don't know. So.
I can't give you the exact location, but we do have a building, and I need to keep it secret. And I need to keep it secret because I'm just so scared of somebody just making trouble for us and telling the local authority that we're a bad bunch of people.
And that can happen from every aspect.
But East Sussex.
Yeah. Okay.
It's East Sussex. Mainly for the fact that most of the collection comes from there, and Doreen's hometown was Brighton. So
Okay.
places she loved.